It's story time with Miss Kelly. Causeway Critters, episode number 5. Kirby and the Oyster Shell. Written and illustrated by me.
Kirby the Crab was walking. He walked and he walked. He walked all day and he walked all night. He was very tired and very hungry. As he was walking, he came across a cardboard box. He said, there might be some food in that box. As he pulled back the flap, a cat popped out. Oh, do you have anything to eat? No, I have nothing to give you, said the cat. I have no food in my box. I have no food around my box. Maybe you should just go. Stop! If you'll not give me something to eat, will you at least give me an oyster shell? An oyster shell? What would you do with an oyster shell? You can't eat a shell. Ah, said Kirby, but I can make a fine gumbo with an oyster shell. The cat had never heard of that, making gumbo from an oyster shell. Fancy that. There are shells on the road, said the cat. The cat picked up an oyster shell and handed it to Kirby. Ooh, this oyster shell's gonna make a fine gumbo. Now, all I need is an old can. Kirby walked away and came back with an old tin can. The cat did as he was told, and soon the water was bubbling in the can. Kirby put the oyster shell into the can. Now we will wait for the shell to cook into a fine gumbo. The can bubbled and bubbled. After a while, the cat said, this gumbo is cooking fast. Oh, it's cooking fast now, said Kirby. But it would cook a lot faster if we had some wild onions. So the cat went to the water's edge to get some wild onions. Into the can went the yellow onions with the oyster shell. Gumbo from a shell, said the cat. Fancy that. After a while, Play-Doh swooped in. Something smells really good over here. It smells good now, said Kirby. But it'd smell a lot better with some shrimp. Shrimp, said Play-Doh. I could get some shrimp. I'm good at getting shrimp. He swooped down into the water and scooped out as many shrimp as he could. Into the can went the long brown shrimp with the wild onions and the oyster shell. Gumbo from a shell, said Play-Doh. How interesting. The can bubbled and bubbled. Tattoo came strolling by. He sniffed. I bet that gumbo tastes good. It tastes good now, said Kirby. But it'd taste even better if we had some celery. I know where there's a garden with celery. I'll go get it. Into the can went the juicy celery, along with the long brown shrimp and the wild onions and the oyster shell. Gumbo from a shell, said Tattoo. Amazing! Can bubbled and bubbled. After a while, some seagulls flew over. It was Mahoney and his friends. Wow, you got some gumbo. That might be as good as my gumbo. Said Kirby. It's not as good as yours now, but it will be with a little bit of pepper and maybe a handful of salt. Consider it done, said Mahoney. And the flock of seagulls flew away to a picnic table and snagged their salt and pepper. Into the pot went a little bit of pepper, a handful of salt, some juicy celery, some long brown shrimp, wild onions, and an oyster shell. Gumbo from a shell, said Mahoney. Who'd have thought of that? And the can bubbled and bubbled. After a while, Snacks came up. And he looked in that can, and he said, this is gumbo? It's not thick enough. This is way too thin to be gumbo. Well, it's too thin now, said Kirby. But it'd be nice and thick with some flour for a roux. So Snacks said, I know just where to find it. So Snacks snuck onto a bait boat. And he reached in and took some flour. So into the can went the roux, with a bit of pepper and a handful of salt, some juicy celery, some long brown shrimp, wild onions, and an oyster shell. Gumbo from a shell, said Snacks. Imagine that. And the can bubbled and bubbled. After a while, the cat tasted the gumbo. Yeah, said the cat, ready to eat. Then Kirby, the cat, Plato the pelican, Tattoo the armadillo, all the seagulls, and Snacks the raccoon sat down and ate all the gumbo. Gumbo from an oyster shell, said the cat. Fancy that. Well, said Kirby, I must be on my way. And he took the oyster shell out of the can and threw it onto his back. Why are you taking the shell? Said the cat. Well, said Kirby, the shell is not cooked enough. I'll have to cook it some more tomorrow. And Kirby said goodbye. He walked on down the road. He walked and he walked. What a fine gumbo that was. And what a fine gumbo I'll have tomorrow, he said to himself. Gumbo from an oyster shell. Fancy that.
The end.